Hi. Hi. Today's topic that was given to me to explore is grief. I think it's one of the most misunderstood words to grieve. To grieve is to be human. You will be surprised, one of the ways they demark us from our evolutionary process, when did we become Homo sapient, was the day they recognized we buried our dead. Up to that point, we probably just left the dead person and walked away. The day we started burying and marking the grave, they said it's one of the sign we became human. So you must understand, grief is not something to be avoided, to be embraced. Grief is the most beautiful thing. It's what makes a human human. The cemeteries, the monuments that we live by are grief. But grief doesn't mean you become sad. When you reject grief, that's when you become sad. Grief is something you embrace. It's part of being a human, part of living. You see, we have been given this opioid, that we have to be happy perpetually, and somebody defined what is happiness. Somebody defined what is success. We are suffering by the definition of the world. And by that, we all supposed to be 24/7 happy. We can be happy with grief. Grief means I'm in touch. Grief means I have made a deep connection. Like right now, am I in grief? All the time. What is happening to the world? What is happening to Palestine? If I hear a child dying, however they politically justified, humanity must be in grief. To me, grief simply means I cannot avoid the truth anymore. Grief means I'm involved. Grief means it's part of me. Let's say you lose somebody you love and you grieve. I think my father died, 15 years ago. I don't think I will ever get over it. Not that I'm grieving, but if I see something he likes, I would think about him. If I travel somewhere, oh, he will love this. That's part of grieving. Grieving is also, in a way, loving. Grieving is also owning. We want to be so dead. We want to be untouched. How can one human being right now on this earth, with what is happening, Ukraine, what is happening in Palestine, what is happening all over the world, from the child trafficking to murder and mayhem, how can you not be in grief, sir? To me, the idea of happiness is to deny my humanness. It's almost becoming inhuman. I'm not saying be sad, I'm saying grief. Live it, own it. Like I always tell you, you had a brother, stillborn, Rishi Siddharth, his name. He died at birth. My firstborn died at birth. Do I grieve? Somebody said, don't you want to get over it? I said, please don't. I said, I'll walk up and slap you. And don't you want to not be sad? Why would I? I'm not suffering by it, I'm carrying it. My humanity is touched. Is my firstborn. I shall live it till I die. That's what makes me human. We have bought into this idiotic idea of somebody being happy and playboy, playgirl and enjoying, and they are just selling you opioid. We must embrace grief with everything you got. To me, almost being meditative means to embrace grief, Not grieving in the way they say you are sad. My action acts in consideration. It makes me consider another. Whether it's a personal loss or loss of another, I think grief is the most beautiful thing. We have to wear it rightly. As a human being, we must grieve. We grieve till today what happened in the genocides around the world. We grieve till today, we grieve. That makes us who we are. Where does happiness lie? My response to my grief. Grief reminds me I connect. Grief reminds me I love. Grief reminds me my humanity. So I think we have to relook at grief. We shouldn't be addicted to this idea of perpetual happiness. It's all nonsense. No, in grief you can be happy too. Grief makes you human. I think empathy, compassion, connection, love, whatever you define being a human is part of grief. Grief is an integral part. It defines me, it shapes me, it makes me who I am. So I would say embrace grief. I'm not hoping it for anybody, but I'm saying it's almost unavoidable. Let it be something that defines you. You know, you see something that is very sad, you see something sad. You should remember it. I think the problem with humanity is we have very short memory. It's not that we have short memory, we block it out. It should transform my action. If what is happening in the world now, and based on the war, if it doesn't change my action, I fail to be a human. I must embrace that grief and do my part. That never happens. And it's an opportunity for me to be a human, opportunity for me to live, opportunity for me to embrace life. I think what has happened to humanity is, and they've sold us this idea of happiness, and they dictate, whoever they are, they dictate. They dictate. We don't consider a man and a woman lives rightly, feeds the family, take care of his success, We look at the person who's accumulated all the wealth as success. I'm saying we have to challenge this definition. Grief wakes up the subjective nature of you, and for me, embrace it. It feels like sorrow. Only if you want to avoid it, if you embrace it, it becomes a force. Well, sometimes you see somebody has a foundation for Parkinson, or somebody researched this for that because somebody in their family died. It's an action of grief, sir. If you see some of the best things that happened in the world, it came out of grief. We have to look at grief rightly. I think you are freed of grief when the necessary respond to that grief. Let's say somebody died and you feel sad. If you have altered yourself not to miss the people you love, that's the result of that grief. Grief can be, I failed something to do too, or the helplessness of unable to do what I can. Grief is co-suffering, not just personal suffering. You suffer along with another. By that, what happened? We want to promote a life that people bloom. We want to promote a life that you have lived you out. Follow carefully. We become somebody who celebrates life and promote. That's the byproduct of grief. And if somebody celebrates and lives life fully, we don't grieve if a 100-year-old man or woman dies. We don't grieve. We're like, good. It's how it's supposed to be. So grief can also mean what could have been was missed. So I must make every action not to miss it. I don't think grief is like if we grieve for the war in the world now, we are supporting the end of it. Grief is sensitivity. I think it is something we must embrace, not reject. I think our addiction to be numb, our addiction not to feel anything is the cause. Have you ever seen somebody in grief? You will never see somebody deeper, You will never see somebody more authentic. You can't even meet somebody authentically when they're happy. Have you seen somebody in grief? You actually connect. The defense disappears. They are in touch with what is there. My question is, why aren't we in touch with it at all time? Why only in a moment of grief we touch? Like I've been to funerals, somebody dies, people are sad. And I used to look at them, good, they are sad. It's what they're supposed to do. But I said, why did you miss this while the person was alive? So could grief be my blindness? Could grief be I missed? If I grieve over the death of my son, you know what it gave me? I would love every opportunity I get when I meet young people. They are like my sons, my daughters. That's what must happen. I will celebrate. Without that grief, that cannot happen. Humanity must learn to grieve. We must never forget. We have short-term memory. You know why we created short-term memory? We think we have to deny it. We don't know how to embrace it. Then there is a depth to me. We want to be shallow. We want to be superficial. If there are people who are grieving, I say, use it. Embrace it. The avoidance of it, the rejection of it, what makes it wrong? Embrace it. What is that you have to wake up to? What is the person you need to wake up to be? What is your part to play? Embrace. If not, grief becomes something that can make a lie out of you and me. It denies my depth. Do you know, maybe this is what I want to say. Human beings are not that superficial, We are pretty profound. There is a depth to us, We think about the people that have passed. We do work for the people of the future. That's the definition of a human, to me. Not these crazy people who are running around trying to pretend to be happy while denying. I think humanity is happiness. I think it's one of the most beautiful things about being human, I can feel sad, I can feel happy, I can grieve. Remember this, I will not wish it. It's like birth pain. It has to happen. When you are speaking, you want to avoid the grief. I want to see what is it waking up in you. You must understand, fundamentally we are lazy. We don't want to transform. We don't want to grow. The time has come. Let's say you have an opportunity. You live in a country you don't like. You want to go to another country. You want to do something. You have a business or you met somebody and you thought it could be something and it didn't become. You are grieving. The grieving is making you confess. The key is confession. You own that confession. The grieving is a tool for personal confession. Let's say somebody is doing a business and it failed. They grieve. What is the confession? No, I don't want to fail. I want to do this. Do you know how beautiful is it when you really discover what you want? Getting what you want is one thing. Knowing what you want is an unbelievable door too, isn't it? So grieve, but don't grieve over grieving. Don't say, I don't want to grieve. Embrace it. Something happens to you. It's like going to the gym, lifting weights, It's pain. But you need that pain for you to grow. You see, what you are is not the end of you. What you are is the beginning, the process. So with every of this emotion, the opportunity to build a muscle, to wake up, to be the person you can be, is at hand. Now here, this is my statement to the world. I'll touch a little bit on what meditation is. Meditation is not sitting eyes closed. Meditation is using, embracing everything that is demanding an evolution of myself. So don't be so faithful to the idea of you. Know the idea of you is what is available as you now. What you can be is yet to be. And whenever you are not being what you can be, you may grieve. So the grief is saying, be more honest. I don't think people get sad when they don't get what they want, I think they get sad when they betray themselves from owning that want. If you own your want, Whether you get it or not, at least one part you're honest. Like, I don't want this. I want to get somewhere. I want to do this. I want to be this person. So, grief, could it be another angle telling you, come on, you've been kidding yourself. Get on with it. You've been lying to yourself. Come on. It's time to be serious. It's time to pay attention. I don't know what is that grief, right? Let's say somebody grieve over a death of somebody. Okay. Maybe you messed up. Maybe you could have met the person more. Maybe you could have said, I love you more. Maybe you could have been there more. Now do that with others now. Now use that. Don't miss another. It is the demand. But the thing is, we are too addicted to remain the idea that we are, and that faithfulness to that idea is what is betraying us. I'm saying you cannot be faithful to the idea of you that was created by you or your surrounding and your condition. The idea of you is nothing but just what you are now, not what you can be. I tell you at the end, there'll be no grief, There'll only be bliss in this sense. Hear me carefully. Because with everything you have evolved, with everything you have grown. You see, I paint. If I mess up a painting, I'll grieve. I'm like, I could have made it nicely. You won't. You're not a painter. I'm the painter. So it's my opportunity, you understand? If let's say I don't want to grieve, I quit painting. You are saying feeling bad is bad. I'm saying feeling bad is when the muscle grows.
But you're not a professional painter. Why do you have to make yourself feel bad if it's not that good?
That's why I'll never be a professional painter, because I don't grieve as much. You see, the difference between my painting, which I think is pretty good, and Van Gogh or Rembrandt or Vermeer, they will die if what I produce is what they produce. They will grieve. So I haven't learned to grieve, you understand? Have you seen like people fashion, if I wear a cloth, they say, are you wearing that? I can't even feel it. I'm like, yeah, it's okay. What's your problem? They're like, oh my God, are you mad? That doesn't match. You can grieve. You have that evolution. I don't have. If I've met a guy, I mean, this is a bad story, His wife, they're quite elderly couple. He loved his wife his whole life. I think both were judges or something. She died for some reason, couple of years fighting the disease, and she died. He died a month or 2 months later. And people say, oh, so sad he died. I said, you are saying sad. I'm like, wow. Did he love her that much? You have to envy that too. My God, they were that much together. He could have lived another 20 years. Maybe he should have. I'm no one to say that. But I'm like, I'm also looking at this part and going like, wow, look at that. Grief is, my painting looks good. Van Gogh or Rembrandt will shoot himself to call that his painting. They will grieve. Why did I produce this, right? So I must learn to grieve. I grieve when there is racism. Why aren't you? I grieve when a child is bombed. I don't care what is the rationale. No child should be killed. I grieve no matter what argument they give. I grieve. I grieve for the genocide. Maybe that's the sensitivity. Maybe that's what it is. Have you seen? Your mother doesn't want me to arrange the hall. She will grieve because for me, I don't care. I don't have, what's the problem with the curtain? It's all good. She'll say, oh my God, are you kidding me? No, grief is the most beautiful thing. It's part of being human. I think we should celebrate our grief. But celebrating the grief leads you to a space that transforms. The problem is you want to free yourself from the pain. If you go to the gym and you want to free yourself from the pain, you are not working out. More so, you have to push to the point that the last rep, you feel like dying. They say the last 2 reps is what builds muscle. You can't push and you're struggling to push and you feel the pain, but how come you can embrace that pain? because you understand. Like I grieve that probably maybe for my father, he could have lived a better life. He could have could have done more things for himself, I suppose. He lived a bit of a selfless life. I grieve, and that grieving will make me live my life better and offer that life to you better. Without that grief, there is no possibility. I think this addiction to perpetual happiness is a drug.
So we have some questions.
Go for it.
People have asked. So one of it is, why does it take so long for grief to subside from the loss of someone close?
I hope it never subsides, I hope it transforms. I know the person asked the question, why does it take so long for the grief to subside? I hope it never subsides. It just transforms. It becomes a way you remember that person. That pain is a reminder of the connection with that person. Hope you don't see it as a pain. Sometimes people say, I want to get over this thing. I said, why? Why? Why not? Live with it. Why not transform it? Why not make it a mild memory? I tell you a story. I used to know a man, his name is Nadesh. He was a hunter when I was young, teacher. He was a loner. His whole life he was a loner. Whole life he was a loner. He's the official tiger hunter those days, or protector, but eventually he became a hunter. So one day I asked him, I must have been 15, I said, you never got married? He said, I did. Oh, I said, you did? Where's your wife? Oh, she died in the Japanese time. He was married like 3 years later. The wife died in the Japanese time. She got some illness and died. I said, that was like 50 years ago or 40 years ago at that time. I said, why didn't you remarry? He looked at me and said, I'm married. I looked at her like, what? I said, how? And then he pulled out a black and white photograph, laminated. He showed me that. People say she's died, but she's here with me. And he's one of these macho, relatively handsome, who could have found, and he's like the man's man kind of guy, really tough guy, real quiet man with few words. I looked at him and I said, well, was he grieving? I know some psychologists will say something, but I looked at him and I go, I hope someday I be as good a man as you are. He's like, yeah. And he once in a while will drink some beer and he will take the photo, look at her, put back. He was loving that woman, whether she was there or not. That was part of grief. Sometimes the question you ask, why does it take so long? Because you want to get out of it. Embrace it. Make it part of your beauty scar. Carry it. I once was in Australia. We were in Australia, remember? I used to go out fishing with these guys, and they are Kurdish guys from Iraq. And I don't speak their language, they don't speak, we used to hang out. And suddenly each one will pull out and show their scar, Look at this, bullet wound. This guy, look at this wound. And then one guy came and pulled his head down and showed, I said, what is that? It was a line. He said, somebody launched a rocket and the blade cut his head. They wear it with such pride, that. You can wear it. That is your life tattoo. You wear it. Makes you you. That's the individualization. I know sometimes it can be crippling. Then you got to talk to the professional. I'm not saying anything. You have to put it right. I know some of it is devastating, but I'm just talking from an upbeat point. Why does it have to go away? Why can't we learn to live with it and move on? Move on doesn't mean denying, Move on doesn't mean denying. Is it, I don't want to make it same. You lose a pet you love a lot. Same thing. You carry the memory. Makes us human. The rest is somebody selling you some kind of bullshit. That is why there's, in the East, there's this notion of enlightenment, awakening and all that. It's almost, they say the person is perpetually blissed all the time, perpetually in ecstasy. No. You go hear some real masters speaking. You see, you look into my eyes, you will see a bliss, but you will see a sadness too. They are both together simultaneously. And in that, you live this life. and make your life be energized by that. But if the grief is crippling, then you got to talk to someone. You got to go see some doctor. You have to get some treatment. Sometimes it can affect people. But I'm just speaking very casually about the subject.
A part of me is grieving continuously. Primordial grief. Where is this coming from and why?
Wow. Whoever asked that question, it's a part of me is grieving and it's a primordial grieving. I think I have the same thing. And it's being human. It's the grief of humanity. It's the sadness of why the world is the way it is. But don't be crippled by it. If you can grieve it, then you can wake up to be an answer for it. Maybe that's what this podcast is going to be like. But whoever asked that question, it's a dedication for me to participate with my grief. I was thinking, what is this podcast going to be? What am I going to do? Maybe this one of the foundation is to voice the grief, human grief. One thing I think, I don't mean to be spiritual. One thing people don't understand is we are all one, we are connected. What is wronged in you is wronged in me. So this person probably is connected to the humanity's grief. Then this person must elect themselves to lead the charge for the transformation. Whether you succeed or not, you must honor your grief. I think you can dismiss your happiness, but you cannot dismiss your grief. That becomes the deepest thing. If you have a grief that you don't know why you are grieving, in my culture, in what I teach, this person is poised to learn about enlightenment. This person must wake up. Like J. Krishnamurti will say, I'm the rest of mankind. He will use that word, I am the rest of mankind. That means he is connected to the grief of humanity. He is not lost in blaming. He is participating in waking up to be the solution. But this I say, we have been told to mind our business. We have been told to just go and find your happiness. I think it's the greatest betrayal statement. You are my business too. You are part of me too. And I think grief is wonderful if you don't label it wrongly, as how you don't label pain wrongly. Running 10 kilometers is painful. Climbing up a mountain is painful. How come we look at it differently? So it's our attitude, right? And if somebody has a grief and they don't know why they are grieving, it's a very deep, it's unending grief. They are connected to humanity. Bless you. Now don't be crippled by it. Wake up. Life is calling. Life is inviting for you to come into action. And maybe this will set the foundation for living a life in celebration. Can you imagine? Grief becomes the fuel for celebration. Wow. Okay? Maybe we'll talk again soon. Thank you.